Ona Judge was born into a world where her life was not her own. Around the year 1773, she came into the world at Mount Vernon, the sprawling Virginia plantation owned by George and Martha Washington. Her mother, Betty, was an enslaved seamstress of mixed-race heritage who worked tirelessly in the main house. Her father, Andrew Judge, was a white English tailor who worked on the plantation as an indentured servant. Under the cruel laws of Virginia, the status of a child followed that of the mother. This meant that from her very first breath, Ona was considered property, just like her mother. She was a dower slave, legally owned by the estate of Martha Washington's first husband, which meant her future was tied directly to the Washington family's wishes and whims, with little hope for change. Growing up on the plantation was a life of constant labor and observation. Ona Judge was surrounded by a large community of other enslaved people, each with their own families, skills, and stories of survival. She learned the rhythms of the plantation, the strict rules that governed every aspect of her existence, and the ever-present threat of punishment or separation from her loved ones. At the young age of about 10, her life took a significant turn. She was chosen from among the other children to become the personal attendant and body servant to Martha Washington herself. This position brought her into the very heart of the Washingtons' private world, requiring her to be available at all hours to assist the nation's most famous woman with her daily needs. This new role was a double-edged sword for the young girl. On one hand, working in the mansion house offered a life away from the brutal physical labor of the fields. Ona learned to be a skilled seamstress, a talent she inherited from her mother, and she became intimately familiar with the customs and manners of the elite white society that surrounded her. She was a constant, quiet presence in the lives of the Washingtons, witnessing history from a unique and challenging vantage point. She was responsible for Mrs. Washington's clothing, her hair, and her comfort, a position that demanded both skill and absolute obedience. It was a life of proximity to power, yet it was a life lived entirely without power of her own. As Ona grew into a teenager, she became an indispensable part of Martha Washington's retinue. Her world was confined but complex, filled with the duties of her enslavement. She watched as the United States was born, a nation founded on the ideals of liberty and freedom, yet her own liberty was denied. Her childhood was not one of play and learning in the traditional sense, but one of service and survival. She was taught to anticipate every need of her enslaver, to be silent and invisible unless spoken to, and to accept that her destiny was to serve the Washington family for the entirety of her life. This foundation of bondage at Mount Vernon set the stage for the extraordinary courage she would later have to find within herself to break free. In 1789, when George Washington became the first president of the United States, Ona Judge's life changed dramatically. At the age of 16, she was chosen to travel with the presidential family to the nation's new capital, New York City. This journey took her far from the familiar world of the Virginia plantation, exposing her to a society that was vastly different from the one she had always known. A year later, the capital moved to Philadelphia, and Ona moved with it. In these bustling northern cities, she encountered something she had never seen before: a large and vibrant community of free black people. They were artisans, business owners, and church leaders who lived with a degree of autonomy that was unimaginable at Mount Vernon. The move to Philadelphia was particularly significant because of Pennsylvania's laws. The state had passed a Gradual Abolition Act in 1780. This law stated that any enslaved person who lived in Pennsylvania for more than 6 months would automatically become free. This legal provision offered a tangible pathway to liberty, a concept that had previously only been a distant dream. The presence of this law created a powerful sense of hope and possibility among the enslaved people brought to the city. For Ona, witnessing free black individuals navigate their lives and hearing whispers about the 6-month residency rule planted a seed of aspiration in her heart. Freedom was no longer an abstract idea, it was a legal reality just within reach. George Washington, however, was keenly aware of this law and had no intention of losing his human property. To get around the Gradual Abolition Act, he devised a careful and calculated strategy. Just before the 6-month deadline approached, he would rotate his enslaved servants, including Ona, out of Pennsylvania and back to Virginia for a short period. This reset the clock on their residency, legally preventing them from claiming their freedom under state law. This deliberate action sent a clear and heartbreaking message to Ona and the others. It showed them that their enslaver, the very man celebrated as the father of his country, would use his power and legal knowledge to ensure they remained in bondage forever. Despite Washington's efforts, the experience of living in Philadelphia had a profound and irreversible effect on the judge. The city's atmosphere was filled with the rhetoric of liberty and the tangible evidence of Black freedom. She moved through a world where abolitionist sentiments were growing stronger each day, and where she could interact with people who believed slavery was a moral sin. This exposure to a different way of life, combined with the crushing disappointment of Washington's legal maneuvering, began to harden her resolve. The taste of near freedom made the reality of lifelong servitude unbearable. She started to understand that if she wanted to be free, she could not wait for it to be given to her. She would have to claim it for herself. The final push that drove Oney Judge to make her courageous bid for freedom came in the spring of 1796. She learned of Martha Washington's plan for her future, and it was a devastating blow. Martha intended to give Oney away as a wedding present to her granddaughter, Elizabeth Parke Custis Law. This news shattered any lingering hope Oney might have had for a better future within the Washington household. Elizabeth was known for having a volatile and fierce temper, and the thought of being passed along to a new, potentially crueler enslaver was terrifying. More importantly, it meant that she would be taken back to Virginia permanently, far from the promise of freedom she had glimpsed in Philadelphia. As Oney later said, "I knew that if I went back to Virginia, I should never get my liberty." With her future hanging in the balance, Oney Judge made a life-altering decision. She chose to run. She knew she could not do it alone, so she secretly sought help from her friends within Philadelphia's thriving free Black community. They listened to her plight and agreed to assist her in her perilous plan. They helped her pack her belongings in secret and arranged for her passage out of the city. On the evening of May 21, 1796, while the Washingtons were eating dinner, Oney slipped out of the president's house. With her heart pounding, she made her way through the city streets to the docks, where a ship named the Nancy was waiting, bound for Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The journey by sea was filled with uncertainty and fear. Every sound, every stranger's glance, could have signaled her capture, but Oney held on to her determination, fueled by the dream of a life where she could be her own person. When she finally arrived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, she stepped onto a shore of freedom, but her ordeal was far from over. George Washington was furious when he discovered she had escaped. He immediately placed a runaway slave advertisement in the Philadelphia Gazette, offering a $10 reward for her return. This public notice turned Oney into a hunted woman, a fugitive from the most powerful man in America. The reward was small, but the risk was immense. Washington was determined to recapture her, but he wanted to avoid public controversy that could tarnish his reputation. He used his network to try and bring her back quietly. He enlisted the help of Portsmouth's customs collector, Joseph Whipple, to apprehend her. When Whipple found Oney, he was moved by her story and her desire for freedom. He warned her and refused to force her onto a ship back to Virginia. Washington even sent his own nephew to New Hampshire in a final attempt to seize her, but a local senator learned of the plot and helped Oney go into hiding. Despite the president's persistent efforts, Oney Judge remained defiant. She would not return to a life of slavery. Having secured her fragile freedom in New Hampshire, Oney Judge began to build a new life for herself. She was no longer a servant living in the shadow of the powerful, but a woman making her own choices. Soon after arriving in Portsmouth, she met and married Jack Staines, a free Black sailor. Together, they started a family and had 3 children, Eliza, Nancy, and Will. For the first time, Oney experienced the joy of having a family that could not be torn apart and sold at an enslaver's whim. She embraced her new community, converted to Christianity, and dedicated herself to learning how to read and write, skills that had been denied to her for most of her life. Her life was not easy. She and her family lived in poverty, and the constant threat of being recaptured loomed over them for years. After her husband's death at sea and the subsequent deaths of her children, she faced immense hardship alone. Yet, when asked in interviews with abolitionist newspapers late in her life if she ever regretted her decision, her answer was unwavering. She stated that she was free, and that she never for a moment regretted leaving the Washingtons. The simple, difficult life of a poor free woman was, in her eyes, infinitely better than the comfortable servitude she had left behind. Her freedom was more precious to her than any material comfort. Oney Judge remained a fugitive in the eyes of the law until her death on February 25, 1848, at the age of 75. She outlived the Washingtons and all who had sought to re-enslave her, dying as a free woman in Greenland, New Hampshire. For many years, Her remarkable story was largely forgotten, a footnote in the grand narrative of America's founding. However, thanks to the interviews she gave and the dedicated work of historians, her voice was not lost forever. Her account provides one of the most detailed and personal narratives of an enslaved person from Mount Vernon, offering a powerful counterpoint to the sanitized version of history. Today, Oney Judge is finally being recognized for her incredible bravery. Her story of courage and self-determination is honored through historical markers, such as the one unveiled near Mount Vernon in 2021, and another in Greenland, New Hampshire in 2025. Exhibits at the President's House site in Philadelphia have shared her story with thousands, though recent political shifts have threatened this commemoration. Even so, Oney Judge's legacy endures. She is remembered not as a piece of property that escaped, but as a courageous American hero who risked everything to claim the freedom and dignity that she knew was her birthright. Her story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of injustice.